Hi, I'm Aidan Gonzalez, and welcome to People in Perspective. Today's guest is Julia Schopick, an award-winning author and patient advocate. How are you, Julia?
Hi, good to be here with you, Aidan.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's great. So, tell me a little bit about your career, and like, you were an English teacher for a while, right?
I was. For about 8 years, I taught college English and loved it, but was not crazy about being part of an institution. So then I went out on my own and became a PR consultant, and I promoted private practitioners, doctors, lawyers, nutritionists, one economist who actually was quite famous, and a bunch of other people. And but I consider myself to be a patient advocate now, and that came from being an author. So I can tell you a little bit about that if you'd like me to.
Could you tell us about your books that you brought in?
Sure. I brought Honest Medicine. That was my first book. And I also brought, it was translated into 3 different languages, and here it is in Polish. Okay? And that is Neznana Medycyna, which means unknown medicine for some reason. In Poland, they didn't understand what honest medicine is. I think they didn't believe it was honest or something. But in any case, while I was a PR consultant, my husband was diagnosed with a cancerous brain tumor. And we had only been married for 5 years. And Aidan, I don't know if you knew, but my dad was a doctor. And he had told me to avoid doctors at all costs, that they were greedy, et cetera, et cetera. But we couldn't quite ignore a brain tumor. So my husband had surgery. It was the size of an orange. Doctors always talk about tumors in the size of fruit for some reason. And he had this surgery, he had chemo, he had radiation. And he was supposed to live 3 years. And 18 months to 3 years, that was the prognosis. And I said, this is not good. For the first few years, we just followed the doctor's advice. But after that, I noticed that he was getting every side effect from the chemo, from the radiation. He even had what's called a radiation-caused stroke, hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain, and he had to have several, and many, many seizures. And I started to research then. I said, maybe we can do better than all of this. So I found a nutritionist whose area was cancer, and especially brain tumors. I looked into that. And we changed his diet, and he went on a lot of supplements, and I tried a lot of other treatments, and he started to do really well. And I was like, this is great. And he ended up living 15 years post diagnosis rather than just 3. And what I found was that the doctors were not at all interested in anything we were doing. They did, however, say that he was their miracle patient, but they didn't say why he was their miracle patient. They kind of took credit for it. And that was okay with me, because they didn't stop me from doing what we wanted to do. But then he had a recurrence of the tumor. And at that point, after that operation, his suture line, where they cut into him, would not heal. And they did 8 more surgeries, and in a vain attempt to get the skin to heal. And at that point, finally, through a doctor, colleague, friend, I found a treatment called Silverlawn, which is the first treatment I talk about in my book, Honest Medicine. And Silverlawn is a wound healing system that has its pieces of material with silver, and it's FDA approved for all non-healing wounds. I won't go into the long story, it's in the book, because I had to get the president of the company to donate. It's a long story, but in any case, he started to heal overnight. And I was excited. I mean, who wouldn't be, And I'll tell you who wasn't. The doctors. The doctors tried to tell me, one of them came over to me and goes, yeah, it's great that he's healing, but we don't think it's what you found that's helping him to heal. And I said, well, what do you think it was? He said, well, we think it was the vancomycin, and that's the IV antibiotic that he had been on for at least 6 weeks. So I pointed that out, and they said, yeah, vancomycin's like that, it can kick in. At that point, I knew I had to do something, because this, that may be a funny story in a way, but it's not so funny, because this is a serious problem with brain tumors, that they won't heal, that the surgery won't heal, the suture line. And by not recognizing, that this product worked, he probably made it so that lots of his future patients would die. So I decided at that point that I had to get the word out there about treatments that were really science-based, and that doctors and patients, and therefore patients, would not know about for life-threatening diseases. And that's what honest medicine is about. Other treatments like Silverlawn that help patients to get better.
Do you think patients should do their own research?
I think if patients don't, well, it's a double-edged sword. My first answer was yes. Unfortunately, absolutely. In both of my books, I wrote a follow-up book called The Power of Honest Medicine. Every single person interviewed found the treatments that saved their lives through their own online research. So absolutely, yes, I do believe that patients have to do their own research. By the way, there are certain conditions where if the doctor has the answer and it works, fine. But in many cases, especially with things like chronic conditions, autoimmune diseases, it's not so cut and dry. And patients do better by doing their own research. But as I said, it's a double-edged sword, because if you start doing your research, for yourself, it's very hard to do it. You're not feeling well, you're sick, you have cancer or whatever, and you're trying to do your own research. So, you may have to get somebody to help you do it. But yes, looking outside the box, I think, is crucial. And especially when doctors only spend a few minutes with you many times.
Now, I heard you spoke a little Yiddish. Could you tell us your favorite phrase in Yiddish?
Well, my favorite phrase, yes. My favorite phrase is "Gornisht helfen." That means nothing will help. It is Yiddish, and I don't know if our audience understands, but Yiddish is one of the languages that Jews from the old country would speak. It's actually having a renaissance now. There's a Yiddish singing group in Oak Park, which I helped to start. But Gornisht helfen is one of my favorites with regard to the medical system. People say, well, what do you do? You have to get a whole new mindset. Nothing will help to change the way it is now, except getting a new mindset.
How have these treatments helped people?
There you go. Well, there have been, let me tell you about the treatments, okay? The first one that I told you about was Silverlawn for non-healing wounds. And it's also used, by the way, for burns. People who are severely burned. This is a treatment that really does heal people almost immediately. It's excellent. The other treatments that I wrote about were one I know you've heard of, which is the ketogenic diet, because it's now all the rage. Everybody is on the ketogenic diet. There's keto this and keto that. There's a new book called Clearly Keto. There are many, many books about the ketogenic diet for health, but it was originally invented, I guess I would say, or found for pediatric epilepsy in children. And you ready for this? 1920s, it was the standard of care in places like Johns Hopkins and the Mayo Clinic. And it was the standard until, what do you think happened? Anti-seizure medications came on the market. And then the doctors decided that, those were easier to prescribe, and a diet, you have to be very strict on it. So it fell out of favor. And one of the heroes of my book, of Honest Medicine, is Jim Abrams, the man who was the producer, director, writer of that movie Airplane that everybody knows about, that was in the 1980s. And his son Charlie had seizures, he had epilepsy. And Jim, through his own research, found the ketogenic diet. Of course, the doctors discouraged him from using it. And they said, no, the only thing that will work is to give the child more he was on about 4 or 5 anti-seizure medications. And they said, we got to give him more, and we also have to do a surgery. They did the surgery. Right after the surgery, he started having seizures. Jim said enough, and he took Charlie to Johns Hopkins, where they put him on the diet, and he never had a seizure again. So, you know, now there are thousands of children and adults too who are on the diet for epilepsy. The other 2 treatments that I wrote about are intravenous alpha lipoic acid for end-stage liver disease. The man who pioneered that is Dr. Bert Berkson. He's in my book. And Dr. Berkson has kept a lot of people from needing liver transplants. And the 4th one is low-dose naltrexone, and that is a very, very low dose of a drug that was invented for something else entirely, getting people off drugs, off heroin. And that's also a fascinating story.
Maybe for another time.
For another time, absolutely.
But it was very inspiring hearing about your career and how you persevered through all these difficult things in your life.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. I'm Aidan Gonzalez. This was People's Perspective. Tune in next time.